the chartered companies. Now, after looking at all that, we can look at the problems faced. But the most important was roles played. But these roles always come with the various, for example, the chartered companies. Chartered companies had different administrators or imperialists who worked with them. We saw Dr. Carl Peters. We saw Captain Frederick Lugard. So it is imperative also to hint on the roles of these people as individuals working with the companies. What input they put in, what they do to ensure that indeed colonization does what takes place. So it's time to look up about these people. I will look at them briefly, and maybe if time allows, to look at the various problems faced by the various agents. But of course the problems are the same. Problems faced by the missionaries, problems faced by chartered companies, problems faced by the explorers are more or less similar. So it is good to look at a role of Dr. Carl Peters. Role of Dr. Carl Peters. Yes. And of course I already told you that this is the man who, of course, founded the German East African Company as early as 1884, and by 1885 it had already been put in operation, and from the German Colonization Society, and which of course took over various colonial spheres in East Africa, especially in German East Africa, the one we called Tanganyika. But of course, this same person had been instrumental in negotiating of how to take over Uganda, for example. He wanted also to take over Uganda on behalf of Germany. But of course, at the end of the day, we saw the Brits taking the helm of this thing. But at the same time, we cannot forget that all of them wanted to take over Uganda. That one was reflected in the Anglo-German conflicts in East Africa, where the English and the Germans all wanted to take over Uganda. And of course, you know why? Because of her strategic consideration, because of her strategic location. And the most important is the presence of of the Nile. So we are going to look at Dr. Carl Peters, and of course we shall look at him as being, after the background I've given you, we shall look at him as pioneer of German colonization. He was pioneer of German colonization. And what do we mean when we talk of pioneer? He's the man who started the entire German colonization process. Yes, here in East Africa. Yes, next. Founder of GECO. Founder of GECO, yes, is the man who was the brainchild of this noble society, that is the German East African Company, GECO. Yes, we are saying he was the brain child of the German colonization society. He was the brainchild. He was a metamorphosis of the colonial, of the German colonial society. It is the one that gave him to achieve this kind of fame. Yes, the German colonization society that carried out colonial missions all over the globe on behalf of the Germans. Next, in 1885, he received an operation charter. He received an operation charter from Germany. What is this we are calling an operation charter? Of course, I told you by definition, these were the charter companies were groups of organizations that had been given charters or licenses from their respective home countries to operate on their behalf. So this is what we are looking at. 1885 received an operation charter from Germany. In other words, he gets license to allow him carry on the activities of the company on behalf of the respective home country, and that is Germany. Next, he signed several treaties. Yes, now we are looking at the roles. This part of the background, yes, or introduction. And after this, you cannot go and say the following were therefore the rules. That one I already stopped students from doing. So we are going straight forward to his rules. He signed protection treaties. Protection treaties. Yes. And this one we had already seen when we saw the roles played by Giacomo and another church in the company, Ibeco. So what was the importance of these treaties of protection? That is the one that marked the beginning of colonial cooperation with the African chiefs, or the beginning of collaboration. Which chiefs are those? Which chiefs, especially in Kilimanjaro region? Talk of Ukami, talk of Ugali, and many others. And those chiefs were now put at the same working level. I mean, they were put in good terms with the company, and that one benefited the colonists later. All those were efforts of Dr. Carl Peters. What else did he do? And what was the importance of these treaties? The treaties allowed the Germans, treaties above allowed German occupation of many areas in Tanganyika. So by signing the treaties with the various chiefs, the treaties allowed the German occupation of many areas. So they had been given permission to occupy any part which had been approached by Dr. Carl Peters. So he never had trouble when he reached there. And the Germans also never had trouble because somebody had signed a treaty on their behalf. Yes. He financed, another role played by Dr. Carl Peters. He financed the administration of colonies. Yes, like Tanganyika, for example. The colonies could not operate without finance. So he mobilized finances, of course, from home country, and then used them on the respective colonies. And of course, this enabled progress of colonial work. What else did he do about financing? He provided protectorate manpower. He provided protectorate manpower. That what mean? A protectorate manpower. This was the one that finally kick-started German colonial activities. And of course, we know the Germans used the direct rule system. Direct rule which never brought in the use of Africans in the daily operations of the Germans. It was a system that kicked out the use of Africans in the administration of the colonies. Direct. In fact, it brought in manpower from the coast. Upon the coming of the Germans, the Africans lost their what? Their powers. For example, the local chiefs were no more. That's why we saw the men from the coast, the brutal Akidas and Jumbes, coming to take over from the local chiefs. So, who was that providing protectorate manpower? It was Dr. Carl Peters, who even mobilized the Akidas and Jumbes to come in and take over the administration of these areas in Tanganyika, some of which were very hostile, like Iringa and Mahenge. So those ones needed the use of militarism, and that's why we saw the flogging of these people as the order of the day. So he was behind all that. Next, he was behind the colonial negotiations for territory in East Africa. What does this one mean? He was behind the colonial negotiations for territory in East Africa. There was a time when the English and the Germans had sour relations. The Anglo-German rivalry. And of course, what was this rivalry for? It was for colonies and more especially the control over Uganda, which the British didn't want the Germans to talk about. Yes. When the scramble for East Africa reached, the English and the Germans sat and agreed on how to share the 3 East African countries. But in the first settlement, it was agreed that Britain takes over Kenya, whereas the Germans take over Tanganyika. That was agreed. And little did the Germans know that the first settlement was intended to blindfold them about talking about Uganda. So later, the Germans were very inquisitive to find out why wasn't Uganda talked about in the sharing process. That one led to the signing of the so-called First Anglo-German agreement. That was to put these rivalries over. The Germans had to ensure that rivalry between the Brits with them did not go forward. So that was led to the First Anglo-German Treaty of 1886, the First Anglo-German Treaty, that saw the 2 countries sharing, still without sharing Uganda, still in this agreement, Uganda was kept outside. So the Germans insisted that another agreement is signed. That one led to the signing of the 1890 agreement, Second Anglo-German agreement, which was also known as the Heligoland Treaty. And it is in the Heligoland Treaty that now the British mentions something to do with who takes Uganda. Who takes Uganda. And before they could mention who takes, they convinced Sultan, the Sultan of Zanzibar, who was by then Sultan Bagash. Then Bagash agrees to sell a 10-mile coastal strip, which we saw in the Anglo-German Treaty of 1886, that is able to relinquish it to the Germans for compensation. And who was going to give him compensation? It was the British. And on top of that, they would add the island of Witu. They would add the island of Witu to the Germans. You can see how the Germans were being given small patches of land in order to get away from complaints to do with control of Uganda. So in the agreement of 1890, after convincing the Sultan to give away the land, the 10-mile coastal strip, so it was now evident that the Germans were now pushed out of the run for control of Uganda. And that's how the British finally took over Uganda. Of course, because of the strategic importance of Uganda to the British. That is the control of the source of the Nile. The British were not very happy to see any other European country coming to Uganda to control it. That would jeopardize the British interest in North Africa and along the entire Nile Valley. So that one was a risk. If any European country had colonized Uganda, it would divert the flow of the Nile. By the way, Amin wanted to do it. When Amin asked for help from the north, and they refused it, he threatened to divert the flow of the Nile. Yes, that he had even brought excavators